Okay.
Help strengthen your case. The process takes time, but when
The rhythmic tapping of Daniel Langford's expensive Italian leather shoes echoed through the marbled lobby of the Skyline Hotel. At 32, he carried himself with the practiced poise of a man born into privilege, but his blue eyes held a weariness that belied his years. As he strode towards the private elevator, the staff's hushed whispers followed him like a wake. "Good morning, Mr. Langford," the concierge called out, a little too eagerly. Daniel nodded, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The elevator doors closed, and he leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. The mirrored interior reflected a man dressed impeccably in a tailored charcoal suit. But Daniel saw only the expectations weighing on his shoulders. In his top-floor office, Daniel gazed out at the Toronto skyline. The Langford Hotel Group's properties dotted the landscape, each a testament to his family's empire. His fingers absently traced the etched nameplate on his desk. Daniel Langford, CEO. "Your 9 a.m. is here, Mr. Langford." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Send them in, Susan," Daniel replied, straightening his tie. The board meeting dragged on, filled with profit margins and expansion plans. Daniel found himself nodding along, his responses automatic. As the meeting concluded, he couldn't shake the feeling of disconnect that had been growing for months. Later that evening, Daniel sat alone in his expansive penthouse apartment, nursing a glass of scotch. The TV droned on in the background, a travel show featuring adventurers exploring remote corners of the world. He watched enviously as the hosts laughed with locals, tried street food, and experienced life unencumbered by expectations. His phone buzzed. Another message from his mother, asking about his plans to settle down. Daniel ignored it, his mind drifting to his father's last words 2 years ago. "Remember, son, Our name is on every door. Make it mean something. But what did it mean to him? The question haunted Daniel as he poured another drink. A notification popped up on his phone. A reminder about tomorrow's staff meeting at a chance to step out of the shadow of his name. Daniel took a deep breath and dialed. "Hey Mark, I need a favor, and it's going to sound crazy." As he hung up, Daniel looked out at the city lights. Tomorrow, he wouldn't be Daniel Langford, heir to a hotel empire. He'd be just another face in the crowd, seeking something he couldn't quite name. Freedom, understanding, or perhaps a part of himself he'd lost along the way. The next morning, Daniel stood before the mirror in his walk-in closet, surrounded by rows of designer suits and shoes. He reached past them, selecting a pair of worn jeans and a simple button-down shirt he'd bought at a department store the night before. As he dressed, he felt the weight of the Langford name slipping away. He mussed his usually perfectly coiffed hair and slipped on a pair of nondescript glasses. The stranger in the mirror smiled back at him. "Nice to meet you, Ethan Hart," he murmured, testing out his new identity. With a deep breath, Daniel, now Ethan, grabbed his hastily packed suitcase and headed out. The drive to the Skyline Hotel felt surreal. He'd made this journey countless times, but never like this. Never as just another guest. As he pulled up to the valet, Ethan felt a flutter of nervousness. "You can do this," he whispered to himself, handing over his keys to a young attendant who didn't give him a second glance. The lobby of the Skyline Hotel was a masterpiece of modern luxury, all sleek lines and warm lighting. Ethan took it in with fresh eyes, noticing details he'd overlooked before. The soft classical music playing in the background, the subtle scent of lavender in the air, the way the sunlight caught the crystal chandelier, sending prisms dancing across the marble floor. At the reception desk, a young woman greeted him with a professional smile. "Welcome to the Skyline Hotel. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, under Ethan Hart," he replied, surprised at how easily the lie came. He felt a twinge of guilt but pushed it aside. As she typed, Ethan glanced around, taking in the ebb and flow of guests and staff. A group of businessmen in crisp suits strode purposefully towards the conference center. A family with 2 young children struggled with their luggage, the parents looking frazzled. A bellhop rushed to their aid, and Ethan made a mental note to review their check-in procedures. His gaze landed on a woman near the concierge desk, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She was speaking animatedly to a couple, her hands moving expressively as she explained something. There was an energy about her that drew Ethan's attention. "Mr. Hart." The receptionist's voice drew his attention back. "Your room is ready. You'll be in 1408, one of our deluxe king rooms. Is there anything else you need?" Ethan shook his head, accepting the key card. "Actually, could you tell me, who is that woman over there?" He gestured discreetly towards the animated speaker. The receptionist followed his gaze. "Oh, that's Sophia Martinez, our events coordinator. She's wonderful, always going above and beyond for our guests. Would you like me to introduce you?" "No, thank you," Ethan replied quickly. "I was just curious." As he made his way to the elevators, Ethan stole one last glance at Sophia. There was something captivating about her energy, so at odds with the polished restraint he was used to in his corporate world. In his room, Ethan set down his suitcase and walked to the window. The view of Toronto was breathtaking, but for once, he wasn't thinking about property values or occupancy rates. Instead, he found himself wondering about the lives of the people he could see on the streets below. A knock at the door startled him. "Housekeeping." Ethan opened the door to find a petite woman with kind eyes and graying hair. "I'm Lily," she said. "Just checking if you need anything?" "No thank you, Lily. Everything's perfect." As she turned to leave, Lily paused, her brow furrowing slightly as she looked at him. For a moment, Ethan feared his cover was blown. But then she smiled and walked away, leaving him to wonder if his paranoia was already getting the best of him. Closing the door, Ethan leaned against it, heart pounding. This was it. He was in. Now, to experience his hotel as never before, and perhaps to discover something about himself in the process. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of new experiences for Ethan. He dined in the hotel restaurant, marveling at the attentive service he'd always taken for granted. The lobster bisque was exquisite, but it was the genuine warmth of the waitstaff that truly impressed him. He made a mental note to review the employee recognition program. In the gym, He chatted with other guests about their stays, absorbing their feedback like a sponge. A businessman from Chicago raved about the in-room coffee machine, but complained about the Wi-Fi speed. A couple from Melbourne gushed about the rooftop bar, but mentioned the long wait for the elevators during peak hours. Each interaction, no matter how small, felt like a revelation. Ethan found himself jotting down notes in the evenings, ideas for improvements swirling in his mind. It was on his third day when he encountered Sophia again. He was sitting in the hotel bar, nursing a gin and tonic, when she walked in, looking slightly frazzled. Her hair, usually immaculate, had a few strands escaping from her bun, and she was carrying a stack of folders. "Long day?" Ethan ventured as she took the seat next to him. Sophia looked up, surprised, then smiled. The warmth of it caught Ethan off guard. "Is it that obvious?" she asked, setting down her folders with a sigh. "Only to a keen observer," he replied, raising his glass in a mock toast. She laughed, the sound genuine and unrestrained. It was so different from the polite titters he was used to in boardrooms. "I'm Sophia, by the way, events coordinator extraordinaire, or at least that's what they tell me." "Ethan Hart," he introduced himself, the lie coming easier now. "I've heard great things about you from the staff." They fell into easy conversation, Sophia's warmth drawing him in. She told him about the charity gala she was planning, her eyes lighting up as she described her vision. "It's going to be amazing," she said, gesturing excitedly. "A night of old Hollywood glamour, all to benefit local children's hospitals. We're transforming the ballroom into a 1940s supper club, complete with a live jazz band and vintage cocktails." Ethan found himself captivated, not just by the event, but by Sophia's passion. "It sounds wonderful. I don't suppose you need any volunteers." The words were out of his mouth before he could stop them. Sophia's eyes widened. "Are you offering? Because I could definitely use an extra pair of hands. Things are a bit tense around here lately." Ethan's ears perked up. "Tense? How so?" Sophia bit her lip, seeming to debate whether to continue. "It's probably nothing," she said finally. "Just rumors about a potential buyout. You know how it is in the corporate world." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. A buyout? How had he not known about this? He forced his face to remain neutral. "That sounds stressful. All the more reason to help with the gala, right? Take your mind off things." Sophia's smile returned, albeit a bit subdued. "You're right, and I'd be grateful for the help." As they continued chatting, neither noticed Lily watching them from across the room, a puzzled expression on her face. She'd seen countless guests come and go, but there was something different about this Ethan Hart. Something familiar that she couldn't quite place. The evening wore on, and as Ethan bid Sophia goodnight, he felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the gin. He was excited about helping with the gala, yes, but more than that, he was excited to spend more time with Sophia. As he rode the elevator back to his room, Ethan's mind raced. He had to find out more about this potential buyout. But how could he do that without revealing his true identity? And why did the thought of disappointing Sophia make him feel so uneasy? The doors opened on his floor, and Ethan stepped out, more determined than ever to see this adventure through. Little did he know, the real challenges were only just beginning. As the charity gala drew nearer, Ethan found himself spending more time with Sophia, their collaboration blossoming into a genuine friendship. One afternoon, as they worked on finalizing the seating arrangements in a small conference room, the air conditioning hummed softly in the background, a stark contrast to the bustling hallway outside. Sophia's curiosity finally got the better of her. "So, Ethan," she began, her tone casual as she peered at him over a stack of place cards. "What brings you to Toronto? Business?" Ethan paused, his mind racing to construct a plausible story. The lie felt heavy on his tongue. "A bit of both, actually. I'm a consultant. Thought I'd extend my stay and enjoy the city." Sophia nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Well, I'm glad you did. Your help has been invaluable." As they continued working, Ethan found himself revealing more than he intended, sharing anecdotes from his childhood and his passion for architecture, carefully edited to exclude any mention of the Langford name. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, casting a warm glow on Sophia's face as she listened intently. "You know," Sophia said, her eyes twinkling, "for a consultant, You have a remarkable eye for hotel operations. Are you sure you haven't worked in the industry before? Ethan laughed nervously, quickly changing the subject. Just observant, I guess. Tell me more about this charity you're supporting. Meanwhile, Lily's suspicions continued to grow. During her rounds, she overheard snippets of Ethan's conversations, noticing inconsistencies in his story. Her years of experience had honed her intuition, and something about Ethan Hart didn't quite add up. That evening, as Ethan returned to his room, he found Lily finishing up her housekeeping duties. The scent of lemon-scented cleaner hung in the air. "Good evening, Mr. Hart," she said, her gaze lingering on him a moment too long. "Everything to your satisfaction?" "Yes, thank you, Lily," Ethan replied, an uneasy feeling settling in his stomach. He couldn't shake the feeling that Lily saw more than she let on. As Lily left, Ethan couldn't help but feel that his carefully constructed facade was beginning to crumble. He sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, the weight of his deception pressing down on him. The next day, as Ethan and Sophia were reviewing the event budget in the hotel's sun-drenched atrium, his phone rang. The caller ID displayed Daniel Langford's office. Ethan's heart raced as he quickly silenced the call. Sophia glanced at the phone, her brow furrowed. "Aren't you going to answer that?" "It's not important," Ethan said, his voice strained. "Where were we?" Sophia's expression softened, sensing his discomfort. As they worked, Ethan found himself opening up about his family's expectations and his struggle to find his own path, the truth mixing dangerously with his fabricated identity. "Sometimes," he admitted, staring at the lush plants surrounding them, "I feel like I'm living someone else's life." Sophia reached out, squeezing his hand. The warmth of her touch sent a jolt through Ethan. "I understand. It's not easy to balance others' expectations with your own desires." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Ethan felt an overwhelming urge to confess everything. But the fear of losing this newfound connection held him back. As they parted ways, the guilt of his deception weighed heavily on him, threatening to unravel everything he'd built over the past few days. The calm of the past few days was shattered when Ethan overheard a conversation between two executives in the hotel lobby. Hidden behind a large potted palm, he listened intently, his heart racing. "Vertex Hotels is making a move," a gravelly voice said. "They're offering a substantial sum for the skyline." "But what about the Langford family?" another voice responded. "Surely they won't sell their flagship property?" "Word is, the young Langford isn't as invested in the family business. Vertex smells blood in the water." Ethan's mind reeled. Vertex Hotels was known for its aggressive takeovers and cost-cutting measures. If they acquired the skyline, everything he'd come to appreciate about the hotel, the dedicated staff, the attention to detail, the sense of community, would be at risk. He found Sophia in her office, poring over last-minute gala details. The room was a whirlwind of color swatches, seating charts, and floral arrangements. "Hey," he said, trying to keep his voice casual. "Have you heard anything about Vertex Hotels showing interest in the skyline?" Sophia looked up, surprised. Her pen clattered to the desk. "How did you know about that? It's supposed to be confidential." Ethan backpedaled quickly. "Oh, I just overheard some suits talking in the lobby. Sounded serious." Sophia sighed, running a hand through her hair. The worry in her eyes was palpable. "It is. The staff is on edge. Vertex has a reputation for gutting the hotels they acquire. Jobs would be lost, services cut. This place, it's more than just a hotel, Ethan. It's a family." Ethan felt a surge of protectiveness, both for the hotel and its employees. There must be something that can be done, he mused, more to himself than to Sophia. She gave him a quizzical look. "You seem pretty invested for a guest." I've grown fond of this place," Ethan replied, avoiding her gaze. The lie tasted bitter in his mouth. As the day progressed, Ethan found himself torn between his role as Ethan Hart and his responsibilities as Daniel Langford. He discreetly made phone calls, trying to gather more information about Vertex's plans without revealing his true identity. The stress of his double life was beginning to take its toll, manifesting in a persistent headache and a knot in his stomach. During a break from gala preparations, Ethan overheard Lily talking to another housekeeper in the staff corridor. The smell of clean laundry wafted from the nearby linen closet. "I'm telling you, there's something off about that Ethan Hart," Lily whispered, her voice laced with suspicion. way he moves, the way he talks. He reminds me of someone. Ethan quickly walked away, his heart pounding. He knew his charade was on borrowed time. That evening, as he and Sophia were leaving the hotel after a long day of work, they nearly collided with a group of executives entering the lobby. The men's expensive cologne hung heavily in the air. Ethan recognized them immediately, the CEO and CFO of Vertex Hotels. "Excuse us," the CEO said gruffly, barely sparing them a glance. As they walked away, Sophia turned to Ethan, her face pale. "That was Jeffrey Roth, CEO of Vertex. This is worse than we thought." Ethan nodded grimly, his mind racing. He knew he had to act, but doing so would mean revealing his true identity. As they stood there in silence, the weight of his deception pressed down on him like never before. "Sophia," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "There's something I need to tell you." But before he could continue, Sophia's phone rang. "It's my boss," she said, answering quickly. "I have to take this." As Sophia walked away to take the call, Ethan was left alone with his thoughts, knowing that the moment of truth was rapidly approaching. The bustling lobby suddenly felt suffocating, the cheerful chatter of guests a stark contrast to the turmoil in his mind. The night of the charity gala arrived. The Skyline Hotel transformed into a glittering homage to old Hollywood glamour. The air was thick with the scent of roses and the sound of clinking champagne glasses. Guests in tuxedos and sparkling gowns filled the grand ballroom, their excitement palpable. Ethan, dressed in a rented tux that felt foreign on his body, stood by the entrance, greeting guests alongside Sophia. He marveled at her poise, the way she effortlessly charmed everyone she encountered. Her red gown shimmered under the chandeliers, and for a moment, Ethan allowed himself to imagine a future where he could be by her side, not as Ethan Hart, but as his true self. As the evening progressed, Ethan couldn't shake his unease. The looming threat of the Vertex takeover weighed heavily on his mind, and he knew he'd have to act soon to protect the hotel and its staff. The jazz band played a melancholic tune, eerily fitting for his mood. Midway through the event, Ethan spotted Jeffrey Roth, the Vertex CEO, deep in conversation with members of the Skyline's board. Their hushed tones and serious expressions sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Unable to resist, he edged closer, straining to hear their discussion over the music and chatter. "Substantial offer," Roth was saying, his voice low but firm. "It's in everyone's best interest to move quickly and quietly. The young Langford seems disinterested in the day-to-day operations. This could be a smooth transition." Ethan's fists clenched at his sides, anger and guilt warring within him. He had to do something. Consequences be damned. Just then, Sophia appeared at his elbow, the scent of her perfume momentarily distracting him. "Ethan, there you are. The director of the Children's Hospital wants to thank you personally for your help." Before Ethan could respond, a commotion near the stage caught everyone's attention. Lily, looking flustered but determined, was whispering urgently to the event MC. The man's eyes widened, and he nodded, stepping up to the microphone. The feedback whine cut through the noise of the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced, his voice echoing through the ballroom, "we have a very special guest with us tonight. Please welcome the CEO of Langford Hotel Group, Mr. Daniel Langford." A spotlight swung around, landing squarely on Ethan. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. The weight of hundreds of stares pressed down on him like a physical force. Sophia stared at him, confusion and hurt dawning on her face. "Ethan?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sudden murmurs rippling through the crowd. "What's going on?" Heart pounding, Ethan stepped forward. There was no going back now. The crystal chandelier seemed to dim, focusing all attention on him. I can explain," he began, his voice shaky. But before he could continue, Jeffrey Roth pushed through the crowd, his face a mask of fury. "Daniel Langford? What kind of game are you playing?" The room erupted in gasps and furious whispers. Ethan saw the betrayal in Sophia's eyes, the shock on the faces of the hotel staff he'd come to know and respect. The jazz band had stopped playing, leaving an oppressive silence broken only by the angry voices rising around him. "I'm sorry," he said, his words directed at Sophia but loud enough for all to hear. "I never meant to deceive anyone. I just wanted to understand, to see things from a different perspective." Sophia shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. The hurt in her gaze cut deeper than any words could. "I trusted you," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan alone in the spotlight, facing the consequences of his deception. The weight of his family name, which he had so desperately tried to escape, now seemed heavier than ever. As chaos erupted around him, Ethan knew that the real challenge was only beginning. He had a hotel to save, a reputation to rebuild, and most importantly, a trust to regain. The glittering ballroom, once a scene of celebration, now felt like a battlefield, and Ethan stood at its center, more alone than he had ever been. The days following the gala were a whirlwind of damage control for Daniel. The revelation of his true identity had sent shockwaves through the hotel and beyond. He found himself constantly bombarded by press inquiries, board meetings, and damage control sessions with his PR team. The Skyline Hotel, once his sanctuary, now felt like a prison. Every corner held a memory of his time as Ethan Hart. A constant reminder of the trust he had broken. He had tried calling, texting,